Today we're taking a look at the 2013 Cadillac ATS. Now this is an all-new model for Cadillac, and this is their first real 3 Series competitor. What about that Cadillac CTS, you ask? Well, the CTS was always a bit too big, and it was really more of a 5 Series sized car for 3 Series sized pricing. GM did some research and they decided what customers really wanted was a 3 Series sized vehicle for 3 Series prices. So they went back to the drawing board and they designed this Cadillac ATS. Now it looks very much like the CTS and all the other art and science designed Cadillacs, but it shares relatively little with the CTS other than the engine. I'm not really a huge fan of the proportions of the Cadillac XTS. It seems a little bit too narrow and the hood and the trunk are a little bit too stubby. That's not really a problem here with the Cadillac ATS, however. We have a traditionally long hood and a fairly low stance up front. Just like the XTS, the ATS sports these small Cadillac finlets on the rear, a design cue that I really quite like. For the US market, we have 2 different engine options in the ATS. We have a 2-liter direct injection turbo engine, it's good for 272 horsepower, and we have this 3.6-liter direct injection V6 engine, good for 321 horsepower. Now in other markets, there's also a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder engine available. All 3 engines are mated to a General Motors 6-speed automatic transmission that sends power to either the rear wheels or to all 4 wheels, depending on which option box you check. An interesting point of trivia is that Cadillac uses the same 6-speed automatic transmission that BMW used in the 3 Series, the X1, and the X3 for a decent amount of time. Now that is a General Motors 6-speed automatic transmission, which some might find surprising, but really shouldn't surprise anybody because GM sells transmissions to whoever will buy them. Of course, BMW now uses ZF's 8-speed transmission in all those models, which does leave the Cadillac about 2 gears behind. The ATS has hands down the best interior that Cadillac has ever made. You may not really care for the styling, because styling is a very subjective thing, but there's really no arguing about the quality of this cabin. While the cabin still isn't quite up to Audi and perhaps Volvo standards, this definitely is the equal of the current generation 3 Series, and that's primarily because the 3 Series has a few questionable plastics in it as well. Now there really aren't many things to complain about in the cabin of the ATS, but there are a few things that you should know. This touchscreen control system here shows fingerprints very easily. It does not scratch easily, however. If people are concerned about that, that's not really a worry in this particular system. Likewise, the steering wheel, these dark plastic bits here show fingerprints very well, and there is a slightly questionable airbag cover here. Those complaints are fairly minor, however, because everything else in this cabin really has a top-notch feel, from the stitched pleather dashboard to these nice satin nickel accents in the cabin, and of course the aluminum trim that's in our particular model. And we also have the Cadillac Q system, which is the Cadillac User Experience Infotainment system here in the dash, and unlike systems like Ford MyTouch, which use sort of an old-school touchscreen system, this touchscreen in the dash is very similar to what you'll find in an Apple iPad or other tablet pieces, where you have this solid piece of touchscreen here rather than the pieces of plastic that give way or scratch easily. So this is a scratch-resistant hard plastic screen in this particular vehicle. Our tester has a 12-way power driver seat and a 10-way power passenger seat, but you should spend some time in these seats before you decide to buy, because they aren't particularly comfortable for my body size and shape. Now, seats come in different sizes and shapes, and so do people, so you should just spend some time at the dealer, make sure those seats are comfortable for you before you buy. In the back seat of the ATS, it is important to remember that this is the smallest member of the Cadillac family, and it does compete with those smaller European sedans, so you shouldn't expect a huge amount of room back here, and indeed you don't get it. I'm 6 feet tall. This front driver's seat is adjusted for me at 6 feet tall. As you can see, I do have about 2 inches of legroom left. However, since this is a rear-wheel drive car, the center hump is fairly extreme, and I couldn't really get in this middle seat because this front passenger seat is adjusted for a 6'4" passenger. As you can see, there's essentially no legroom left behind it. However, if you did have 2 smaller people up front, you could fit someone almost my height in the rear. My head is touching the ceiling in this middle seat, but that's primarily because of the sort of exaggerated bucket shapes of the rear bench seat. Now we do get a fairly nice center armrest in this vehicle with a little storage cubby and of course cup holders. And unlike mass market sedans, the interior trappings and the way that these rear doors are finished match the front door, so they are just as nice with the stitched pleather on top and of course the soft touch plastics on the armrests. In the rear seat area, we do have a trunk pass-through for skis, but these rear seats in the ATS don't fold down. The Cadillac scores 7 out of 10 points in our exclusive Trunk Comfort Index, and that's because even though these trunk hinges do occupy a decent amount of trunk space, the trunk is fairly nicely fitted, and of course we do have the largest roller bag you can carry on a domestic flight behind me in the trunk, and I still fit in this trunk fairly comfortably. My only trunk complaint is the size of the cargo hatch, and it is a little bit small, making it a little bit more difficult to get larger items in this fairly large trunk. It's time to look at infotainment options in the Cadillac ATS, but before we go to a close-up of this 8-inch LCD, let's take a look at these touch buttons. So much like my Lincoln Touch and my Ford Touch, all these buttons on the ATS are touch only. There's really no physical button there. And if we touch underneath this button array, we get a storage cubby here with a third USB port. So there are 2 USB ports in the center console, this one here and this little cubby here that's hidden, and power opens and closes. Over here in the instrument cluster, it doesn't really show up quite as nicely in this video, but we have a very high resolution LCD just below the speedometer, and this displays, of course, your trip information as well as your settings and your infotainment information here. You can also use your phone this way. You can click your menu and choose recent calls and contacts, etc. Now we're zoomed in on this screen. Now this is a capacitive touchscreen, not a resistive touchscreen. And basically the difference between those two is in systems like my Ford Touch, they use a resistive touchscreen. So there's a piece of plastic and a piece of plastic. You push on the top piece of plastic, it actually moves, touches the other piece of plastic, and that's how it senses your touch. This particular unit uses a capacitive screen that doesn't actually move, so it feels very solid, feels more like you're used to with an iPad or an Android tablet. This system also works kind of like an Android tablet in that you can move the icons around. So now we're on the home screen. I've pressed and held on the button. As you can see, we can now drag this icon over onto a different page. You can rearrange them if you want your nav to be over here and your Pandora to be over there. You can arrange them like that. The system has a haptic feedback, so when you actually press on a button, the display clicks slightly. It feels sort of like maybe a weight inside the unit that actually moves. Let's look at the audio options now. So now we're on the audio options screen. As you can see, we have a media button here, so we can change between our Bluetooth, our auxiliary input, our CD, and our iPod USB interface. Now the interesting thing about this system is if I had multiple USB or iPods plugged into this device, it would index them all as if it was one large music library. Now the system does have complete voice commands. You can press here.
Say play, followed by a media selection, or say tune, followed by a station number.
Play artist Taco.
Play Taco. Is that correct?
Yes.
Playing.
As you can see, the system will now start playing Taco. Now the voice commands are very good. They're definitely the equal or superior than the My Ford Touch system and the My Lincoln Touch system, which is very unique in this luxury space, honestly, because although the Lincoln MKZ plays to a similar price point, I really couldn't call the ATS and the MKZ competition. The system also features a proximity sensor, so as you can see we now have a slightly reduced interface, but if I put my hand closer to the screen, then more buttons appear both on the top for quick access to phone navigation and climate, as well as forward and backward and voice command button, etc. Now these shortcut buttons on the bottom can be programmed for pretty much anything in this system. So you can see right now these are set for XM radio, but if I press and hold on this button, it'll give me a few options. I can say that I want that button to be this particular song. So if I hit that touch button, it'll automatically go directly to that song. And you can store addresses, calls, people that you want to call out of your phone book, XM and satellite stations, as well as regular radio stations on these presets. And there are a number of pages. Moving through the system is very much like moving through an iPad or an iPhone. Moving over here onto the phone interface, it's your pretty standard phone interface on a nav system. The navigation features on this system are really the only letdown that I noticed, and that's because these graphics are not exactly high resolution, the system is not particularly speedy, and it doesn't have that same polished look that BMW's iDrive has. It is, however, fully functional, does display traffic information, and the voice commands all work very well. Back on the home screen, you can see that we have app integration like Pandora, and Cadillac tells us that there will be other apps to integrate with your iPhone or Android device coming up soon. Over here on the weather screen, you can see your local weather. It displays the local weather over a map of your area that would have cloud information and rain information, etc., if it was raining in our particular area. As you can see, today it's 60 degrees outside with a low of 38 tonight. A complaint about my Ford Touch and my Lincoln Touch systems in the past has been their relative reliability, and that is a problem with this particular system. Now, the system has crashed twice on us in our week with this Cadillac ATS, crashed about the same number of times during our time with the Cadillac XTS. That's fairly similar to what the Lincoln and Ford systems did when they first came out, so I expect software updates from Cadillac to help with that. Now, the touch system here, as I said, is a little bit iffy, and sometimes when you're trying to adjust the volume, the system will think that your finger is still on the touch button and will start raising and lowering the volume randomly without you touching the volume slider here. I'll post a little snippet of that happening just after this so you can see what I mean. The only problem with the touch buttons, as you can see, is sometimes they go a little bit haywire. Right here we're turning the volume down, and as you can see, if we leave, it turns it right back up. Now, a lot of journalists have been talking about the Cadillac ATS as being the ideal 3 Series competitor, but that begs the question, exactly what is the 3 Series and what should the 3 Series be? Because these days BMW has honestly been getting a bit soft. The brand new 3 Series is one of my favorite cars in the luxury and near luxury space, primarily because it's not very BMW-like. It has a soft suspension, it gets excellent fuel economy, fairly powerful, very luxurious interior, and those aren't necessarily the prime qualities that you associate with BMWs as far as sporting sedans. You normally want attributes like excellent handling and powerful acceleration to be listed first before its luxury amenities. And that's really more what I would say about the Cadillac ATS. So the ATS, yes, it has nice luxury features and it has a nice interior, but the first thing you'll notice about this vehicle behind the wheel is that it goes 0 to 60 in about 5 seconds or so, and it does so without any turbo lag and with a fairly nice engine growl. The second thing you'll notice is that this baby really handles. Now, some people like pure rear-wheel drive vehicles, but I'm not one of those people. I prefer a decent all-wheel drive system over pure rear-wheel drive or pure front-wheel drive any day, and that's because the handling is a bit more predictable on windy roads like this. As with most vehicles in this category, we have a manumatic mode for this automatic transmission, so you shift it over to the left, and then you can paddle shift with the paddles that are on the steering wheel. They're not on the column, they're on the steering wheel in this particular vehicle. The General Motors 6-speed automatic may not shift as quickly as the ZF 6-speed automatic that Jaguar uses, but it is very quick, and it does rev match your downshifts as you'd expect. Now, compared to the BMW 3 Series, I quite like the use of the 6-speed automatic transmission in the ATS, because in the BMW 3 Series, honestly, there are an awful lot of gears for that transmission to work with. So if you're really trying to drive the car hard on a winding mountain road like this, then fewer gears is slightly better. I mean, I wouldn't want 4 gears, but 6 is probably a happy medium. Of course, Cadillac does make a 6-speed manual transmission available in the ATS, but we were unable to get one to test from Cadillac, and honestly, the vast majority of ATS sales will be the automatic transmission. Cadillac's 3.6-liter V6 engine has an excellent growl to it. It's definitely worth revving this thing up so you can hear it, although it's not quite as smooth as BMW's inline 6. Our 3.6-liter premium all-wheel drive has both the sport suspension and the Brembo brake package, providing drama-free braking time after time. If I were to buy an ATS, I probably would not get the sport suspension, however, as this suspension is a little bit stiff and punishing for daily driving. So how much will an ATS set you back? Well, they start just over $33,000, and if you check all those option boxes for all-wheel drive and this 3.6-liter engine, then you can get the ATS up to about $55,000. That puts the ATS at solid 3 Series pricing, so there's no more 3 Series for a 1 Series price or a 5 Series size for a 3 Series price going on here. Back to that Cadillac, BMW, Mercedes question, it's important to keep in mind that we are in all honesty comparing an ATS, a 3 Series, and a C-Class in the same sentence without any sense of irony. That's first and foremost. The second thing to keep in mind is that BMW seems to be the new Mercedes, creating a 3 Series that's softer and more luxurious than past generation 3 Series, and General Motors has definitely benchmarked the last generation 3 Series. They even said so in their product literature with this car, meaning that they were benchmarking a harder, more aggressive driving kind of machine. So the question for my readers today is, does that mean that Cadillac is the new BMW and that BMW is the new Mercedes? And if that does mean that, then exactly what is Mercedes now? That's been our quick look at the 2013 Cadillac ATS. Go ahead and friend us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and of course check out the full review on thetruthaboutcars.com coming up soon.